In a small, humble village nestled between rolling hills and golden fields, there lived a poor weaver named Ajoa and her daughter, Abeni. Ajoa's weaving skills were renowned, but Abeni's gift was something beyond what anyone had ever seen. From a young age, Abeni had shown an uncanny ability to weave intricate, mesmerizing patterns into cloth. But these were not just ordinary patterns. As the years passed, villagers began to notice that the designs foretold future events, from simple weather changes to the births of children. Despite their poverty, Ajoa and Abeni lived a peaceful life. However, word of Abeni's extraordinary skill began to spread beyond the village. Whispers reached the royal court, where the kingdom's young and ambitious king, King Kofi, grew intrigued. Little did Abeni know, the simple life she cherished was about to unravel in ways she could never have predicted. King Kofi was a ruler obsessed with power and control. His advisors had warned him of rising tensions in neighboring kingdoms and the possibility of rebellion from his own people. When news of Abeni's magical weaving reached his ears, he saw an opportunity. If the girl's patterns could predict the future, she would be the perfect tool to secure his reign. Without delay, King Kofi sent his royal guards to Abeni's village. The villagers tried to hide Abeni, but the guards were relentless. They stormed the small hut and captured the young weaver. As she was dragged away to the palace, Abeni looked back at her mother, fear and uncertainty clouding her thoughts. What would the king want with her, and how would she survive in a world so far removed from her own? Inside the grand walls of the palace, Abeni was treated as a prisoner, despite the soft silks and fine meals she was offered. She was confined to a small, ornate room, with only her loom and a bundle of thread for company. The king visited her often, watching her weave and demanding answers. He wanted to know the future of his kingdom. Who would threaten him? Who would rise against him? At first, Abeni refused to use her gift for the king's gain. She feared the consequences of meddling with fate. But after days of isolation, she began to realize that refusal might cost her life. Reluctantly, she started weaving again, her fingers moving instinctively over the threads, creating patterns more intricate than she had ever imagined. As the cloth formed under her hands, she gasped. The image woven before her was not what she expected. It showed a kingdom in flames. The cloth Abeni had woven depicted a terrifying future. Flames devoured the kingdom, and the palace crumbled beneath the weight of destruction. King Kofi, standing before the finished work, stared in disbelief. He demanded to know what the image meant, but Abeni had no clear answers. Her gift allowed her to see the future, but not interpret it. She could only feel a growing sense of dread. King Kofi, unwilling to accept the bleak vision, ordered Abeni to weave again. Perhaps another cloth would show a different future, one in which his kingdom stood victorious and prosperous. Abeni complied, but every time she wove, the patterns grew darker, the images more foreboding. Despair settled over the palace as the king became obsessed with changing the fate his weaver had foretold. As days turned into weeks, Abeni's captivity became more unbearable. King Kofi grew more paranoid with each passing day, convinced that enemies lurked in every corner of his kingdom. He increased taxes, strengthened his armies, and punished anyone he suspected of treason. The once peaceful kingdom began to crumble under the weight of his tyranny. Meanwhile, Abeni began to plan her escape. She realized that as long as she remained in the palace, her weaving would only bring ruin. She needed to find a way to stop the king before his madness destroyed them all. But she was closely guarded, and the palace walls seemed impenetrable. Her only hope lay in a risky plan, one that would require her to use her gift in ways she had never before imagined. One evening, as Abeni sat weaving in her chamber, she was startled by the sound of footsteps outside her door. Expecting the king, she braced herself, but instead, a young man slipped into the room. He introduced himself as Kwame, a servant in the palace who had been secretly watching over her. Kwame had long suspected the king's growing madness and believed Abeni's gift could be used to save the kingdom. Kwame revealed a secret passage that led from Abeni's chamber to the palace gardens, a place where they could meet undetected. He urged her to trust him, and together they began to form a plan. Abeni was hesitant, Kwame was a stranger, and her visions of the future were grim. But with no other allies and no other options, she agreed to his plan, hoping that together they might find a way to avert the looming disaster. Late one night, under the cover of darkness, Abeni and Kwame set their plan into motion. Abeni slipped through the hidden passage while Kwame distracted the guards. They met in the gardens and hurried toward the palace walls. Freedom was within reach, but as they approached the gate, they were spotted by one of the king's elite soldiers. A chase ensued, and Abeni's heart raced as they sprinted through the labyrinth of palace corridors. Kwame fought bravely to hold off the guards, but they were outnumbered. Just as it seemed they would be caught, Abeni's hand brushed the fabric she carried with her, the cloth of the burning kingdom. In that moment, she realized something crucial. The prophecy wasn't just a warning, it held the key to stopping the disaster. As the guards closed in, Abeni unfurled the cloth of the burning kingdom and held it up. To her shock, the soldiers hesitated. It was as if they, too, could see the terrifying future it foretold. Abeni's hands trembled as she realized the true extent of her power. The patterns she wove did not just predict the future, they had the power to influence it. With newfound determination, Abeni began weaving even as the chaos of the chase unfolded around her. Each stitch seemed to slow the world around her, the threads bending reality itself. Kwame watched in awe as Abeni's cloth shimmered with a magic neither of them had ever seen before. The soldiers froze in place, unable to move as the fabric glowed with a bright, blinding light. The magic of Abeni's weaving had stunned the soldiers, allowing her and Kwame to escape into the night. They fled through the palace gates and into the dense forest beyond, leaving behind the kingdom and its unraveling future. But Abeni knew their journey was far from over. The vision of the burning kingdom still haunted her, and she knew that simply running away would not be enough. As they made camp in the forest, Abeni began to reflect on her gift. She had always feared the power she wielded, but now she realized that it was not just a curse, it was a responsibility. She had the ability to shape the future, and if she didn't find a way to stop the impending disaster, the kingdom would surely fall. As Abeni and Kwame journeyed deeper into the forest, they sought the counsel of the oracle, a wise woman said to have lived for centuries. The oracle's cave was hidden deep within the mountains, a place where few dared to venture. When they finally reached her, the oracle was expecting them. Her eyes gleamed with ancient knowledge as she welcomed the pair into her dwelling. The oracle revealed that Abeni's gift was tied to the fate of the kingdom. Her weaving could either save the realm or doom it. But to change the future, Abeni needed to understand the source of her power. The oracle handed Abeni a bundle of thread, unlike any she had ever seen before. "This is the thread of destiny," the oracle said. "Use it wisely, for it can both create and destroy." Armed with the oracle's wisdom and the thread of destiny, Abeni and Kwame knew they had to return to the kingdom. But re-entering the palace would not be easy. The king was still searching for them, and his guards were on high alert. Abeni's heart pounded as they approached the outskirts of the city. The familiar streets now felt like a dangerous maze, filled with enemies at every turn. As they slipped through the shadows, Kwame revealed that he had connections with the underground resistance, a group of rebels who were plotting to overthrow the king. Abeni was reluctant to join forces with them, but Kwame insisted it was their only hope. With the kingdom on the brink of collapse, they needed all the help they could get. The resistance leaders were skeptical of Abeni at first, unsure if they could trust a girl with such extraordinary power. But Kwame vouched for her, and Abeni showed them the cloth of the burning kingdom. The rebels were stunned by the accuracy of her visions. They agreed to work with Abeni, hoping that her gift could give them an advantage in their fight against the king. Together, they began to plot their next move. The king's paranoia had left the kingdom vulnerable, and the rebels planned to strike while his forces were scattered. But Abeni knew that force alone would not be enough to save the kingdom. She needed to weave one final tapestry, one that could reshape the future. As the rebellion gained momentum, Abeni found herself caught in a web of deception. The resistance leaders had their own agendas, and some of them wanted to use her gift for their personal gain. Abeni realized that even within the rebellion, there were those who sought power at any cost. She began to question who she could trust. One night, as Abeni sat alone in her chamber, she began to weave again. This time, the cloth showed a different vision, not of the burning kingdom, but of betrayal. Someone close to her would turn against her, and the consequences would be dire. Abeni's hands trembled as she finished the tapestry. The future was more uncertain than ever. Abeni's vision of betrayal came true sooner than she expected. One of the resistance leaders, a man named Kojo, had been secretly working for the king all along. He had infiltrated the rebellion to gain their trust, and now he planned to deliver Abeni to the palace in exchange for power and wealth. Kwame confronted Kojo in a heated argument, but before they could act, Kojo disappeared into the night. The rebellion was thrown into chaos, and Abeni feared that all their efforts would be for nothing. The prophecy of the burning kingdom loomed larger than ever, and time was running out. Kojo's betrayal gave the king exactly what he needed. With inside information from the resistance, King Kofi launched a full-scale attack on the rebels, determined to crush them once and for all. The city erupted into violence as the king's forces clashed with the resistance fighters. Fire and smoke filled the air, and Abeni's vision of the burning kingdom seemed to be coming true. As the battle raged, Abeni retreated to a hidden chamber, desperate to weave one final tapestry. She knew that this cloth would be her last chance to change the course of the future. With trembling hands, she began to weave, pouring all of her hope and fear into the fabric. As Abeni wove the final tapestry, she could feel the weight of destiny in every thread. The vision that emerged was unlike any she had ever seen before. It showed a kingdom not in flames, but reborn from the ashes. A new ruler stood at the helm, one who would bring peace and prosperity to the land. But the image also showed a sacrifice, a figure standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to give everything for the kingdom's future. Abeni's heart sank as she realized what the vision meant. The kingdom could be saved, but only if someone was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. She knew that it would be up to her to make that choice. As the battle intensified, Abeni stood at the edge of the cliff, the final tapestry in her hands. She had woven a future where the kingdom could rise again, but it required a sacrifice, her own life. The threads of destiny had shown her the way, and she knew that there was no turning back. Kwame, who had fought bravely by her side throughout the rebellion, found her at the cliff's edge. Tears filled his eyes as he realized what Abeni intended to do. He pleaded with her to reconsider, but Abeni was resolute. She had seen the future, and she knew that this was the only way to save the kingdom. As Abeni prepared to make her sacrifice, the battle in the city reached its climax. The king's forces were on the verge of victory, but the resistance fought with renewed strength. The people, inspired by Abeni's courage, rallied against the king's tyranny. In a final, desperate move, King Kofi confronted the rebels himself, determined to crush them once and for all. But just as he raised his sword to strike, the ground beneath him trembled. The palace, weakened by the flames and the weight of his cruelty, began to collapse. King Kofi, blinded by his thirst for power, did not see the end coming. In a moment of poetic justice, he fell beneath the rubble of his own palace, his reign ending in the ruins of his ambition. With the king's fall, the battle came to an abrupt end. The people, weary from years of oppression, began to rebuild their lives. The rebels, once seen as outcasts, were now hailed as heroes. The kingdom, though scarred by war, was finally free from the grip of tyranny. Abeni's final tapestry had foretold a new era of peace and prosperity, and the people embraced it with open arms. But Abeni herself was nowhere to be found. Some said she had disappeared into the mountains, while others believed she had been taken by the spirits. Whatever the truth, her legacy lived on in the fabric of the kingdom. Years passed, and the story of Abeni, the weaver's daughter, became a legend. Her tapestries, now revered as sacred artifacts, were preserved in the halls of the new palace. The people spoke of her courage and sacrifice, and her name was remembered as the one who had saved the kingdom from destruction. Kwame, who had fought beside her, became a leader in the new government. He ensured that Abeni's vision for a just and prosperous kingdom was realized, but he never forgot the girl who had woven the future, and he often visited the cliff where she had stood, gazing out at the horizon, wondering if she still watched over them. The kingdom flourished, but the people always knew that their fate had been shaped by the hands of a simple weaver's daughter. And though Abeni was gone, her magic lived on in the threads of destiny, forever woven into the fabric of their lives. I hope you all will enjoy this folk tale. Kindly subscribe for more amazing tales.